What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Okay, it's that time for the Middlekauff Mailbag. You guys know the drill. DMs wide open at John Middlekauff, 2 Fs. Fire in those DMs and get your question answered on the show. Let's start with Nicholas, 23-year-old, Santa Monica, freshly graduated from college. Congrats, Nicholas. Welcome to the real world. College, a lot easier on your mental health, that's for sure. I know it's early, but as a Charger Rams fan, yes, we exist. I have already seen the culture change Harbaugh has brought. I get that it's early to talk about coaching changes for some teams, but for teams that have been dysfunctional for years, Bears, Giants, Carolina, such as the Chargers, who were cycling through head coaches, embarrassing themselves week in, week out. True dat, homie. Why don't those teams go and chase Vrabel this offseason? I know reports came out that teams didn't want to hire him because he's big and seems intimidating. But come on. Do owners really care about that when they don't win? Are they scared to take the big swing? Wouldn't he provide a floor of competitive plus watchable physical football every week as long as he has a competent quarterback? It's clear to me that Dable, Eberflus, Saleh are on the way out. And I'm 99% sure Canales ain't it. Secondly, how long... Well, here's the thing with Vrabel. I think he's got Chicago written all over him. I don't think it necessarily was owners were intimidated. I'd have to go Google that report again. I think general managers. And speaking of Harbaugh intimidated a lot of people in the building. And Trent Baalke, who a lot of people talk shit about, my personal interactions, he's always been cool to me, except the first time I met him back in like 08, 09, when I was at Fresno State. But then ever since, once I worked in the league and was doing media stuff in the Bay, he was cool to me. So I people don't like him, my interactions with him, but him and Harbaugh's relationship started fracturing because Jim was the alpha and it got weird. And Jim, to me, is a much different guy right now. Like, I heard him on with Coward yesterday. You watch these videos, he's loosened up dramatically. And age does that. Like, you just don't have the same fire in terms of getting angry over everything that you did 15 years ago. As you age, it doesn't mean your competitive fire diminishes. It just means, like, I don't need to be so angry about this. I don't need to approach this way. He seems like this is going to sound weird, but matured a lot. And I think you're seeing a new version of Jim Harbaugh. Vrabel, if you watch Hard Knocks, Ryan Poles, I didn't realize this, college roommates with Matt Ryan. He was guard or tackle in college. I'm not sure. He played one of those. He was a fringe, like, NFL practice squad. Like, he's a big dude. He's not going to be intimidated by Vrabel. 2 football guys in the trenches. No, Vrabel's technically a stand-up linebacker, but he looks like a defensive lineman, which he kind of was a hybrid version of that, which he would be in this modern-day football because he wouldn't be able to stand up. But you know what I mean? So I think Vrabel and the Bears are a match made in heaven. Like, I just think that the culture, the toughness, getting a guy that can just corral Caleb. If Eberflus, if they don't win 9 games, even if they went 9-8 and they don't get the 7 seed, I think he would be in trouble. Secondly, how long do you think it will take for the Rams and the Chargers to establish themselves in LA and have a real home field advantage? Every time I watch either of them at home, it's always 50% road fans. It's out of my control, but I wish it were different. I understand the Lakers and Dodgers are light years ahead of them, but the Rams won it all a few years ago, and the Chargers have Harbaugh. I have been saying this about our fan situation so you're a hybrid? Like, I didn't quite realize, I guess I read it. You root for them both? Pretty genius. It's like, more than likely, you're going to have a good weekend, and then when they both win, you're going to be on fire. I didn't know you could really do that. Maybe you're just an LA guy, so you just root for the LA squad. Like, do you root for the Lakers and the Clippers? Do you root for the Angels and the Dodgers? It seems a little weird to me. Where I come from, Northern California, there's a direct line. You either root for the Giants or the A's, and you root for the Niners or the Raiders. Now, it just happened that the pie chart, the Giants and the 49ers have the heavy majority of fans. But I think when you look at, and the Raiders are a good example, why did the Niners, their fan base in terms of numbers, outdraw the Raiders at pretty high proportions in Northern California? Well, the Raiders left. So the Raiders left. I don't have the year off the top of my head. But when they were gone in the 80s and they came back in the mid-90s, you know what happened? Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, and Steve Young showed up. And they built a dynasty. So when they came back, it's like you got generations of new fans. People are born. Young kids are becoming. It's an easy team to root for. Well, the Rams were gone for a long period of time. And what happened during that period of time? Niners are cool. So I think the Niners have such a big presence in Southern California. And like we said, the Raiders literally played down there as well. So their fan base, I think it's very, very difficult. And I think Southern California is nicer than Northern California. Like there's no Newport Beach in Northern California. There's no Manhattan Beach. Obviously, San Diego is fucking beautiful. But the Chargers where I went to school at Cal Poly, we were Northern California and Southern California. Like that's where the majority of people came. And then the ag kids all came from the Central Valley. But I knew people I spent a lot of time with, had dudes in my fraternity that were from San Diego and loved the Chargers. Like watching those games like people would in Philadelphia, like people would in the Bay Area with the Niners, like people would in Dallas with the Cowboys. So anytime you do constant movement, you know why the Eagles, the Bears, the Cowboys, the Niners, like all these teams, they don't move around. So when you're constantly moving, I saw it with the Raiders, it's weird. It's hard for people to get behind. I seen it with the A's, just get absolutely lapped by the Giants. It's like you're always threatening to leave. Like that gets old. And I know the Rams and the Chargers are there for the long haul now, but like the Chargers were San Diego's team. Like that was a pretty big distinction. And then the Rams, when they had success, I don't know, and won a Super Bowl, they were in St. Louis. So like, I know you guys recently won, but I went to the game week 17, 3 weeks before the NFC Championship game where the Rams beat the Niners. It felt like 70-30, maybe 80-20. And I just think it's difficult to overcome that. The Lakers have been in Los Angeles for a long, long time now. The Brooklyn Dodgers moved, I don't know, 75, 80 years ago. So time, fan bases, generations of people, it takes a while. It does not happen overnight. It's to become entrenched in the culture. Like what's entrenched in the culture in LA from a sports standpoint? I would say obviously the Dodgers and the Lakers and USC football and UCLA basketball have always been a really big deal. Why is that? Well, they've fucking been there forever. I mean, they have a lot of history. You have generations of people that didn't have to worry. Well, actually, for the next 20 years, USC is going to play in the SEC, but they're not just going to play in the SEC. They're going to move to Mississippi. I mean, that wouldn't work. So I think it's part of that. Jim Harbaugh is a force of nature. He will do everything humanly possible to make you guys really relevant. Obviously, Sean McVay is a superstar. And I think it's hard to overcome the, transient nature of the franchises. I just think it turns a lot of people off. Teams I've rooted for my entire life, like San Francisco Giants. I don't know, they've moved stadiums, but they've never moved within a 10-mile radius. The 49ers moved stadiums, but my entire life, from the day I was born till the day I'm sitting here, play in the Bay Area. My entire life, the Sacramento Kings, I guess the Kings might have moved in like 86, but have been in Sacramento. So it's like teams, that matters. That has a huge impact on people. So I think that's an element that's kind of hard to overcome. For the mailbag, do you think the signing of Antonio Pierce was the right move for the Raiders? Not going for it on 4th and 1 was a head scratcher. I think Mark was in a really tough spot. because I've said this and I'll reiterate it again. Him and Dean Spanos up until Harbaugh, even though, Mark was looked at like this dysfunctional, let's face it, most people like call him a loser because he looks weird and he's never had a job. He said that, not me. But I will say this, twice, Mark Davis really, really tried to hit a huge home run. He fired Jack Del Rio on the field and immediately, and because he was hiring John Gruden, he gave him 10 years, $100 million. Like, that was a pretty big deal. Obviously, that unraveled on him. And then he has a situation with Bisaccia that, listen, you probably could have done that. But then he had the opportunity to hire Josh McDaniels, which was a catastrophic disaster. Only coach in NFL history to not make it through year two twice, two separate spots. But the 49ers wanted Josh McDaniels the year they hired Kyle Shanahan. The Indianapolis Colts wanted Josh McDaniels. So now we know no one will ever hire him to be their head coach again. But he had been in high demand for the last 6-7 years. And Mark threw, rumors are he gave him like a 6-year contract worth $10 million a year. He's paying him $60 million. So two coaches in like a 4-year, 5-year span, he divvied out over $160 million he was willing to pay guys. And then I think he finds himself in this position. His best player, Max Crosby, loves the guy. And Devontae, his second best player, loves the guy as well. I think it was an easy one. He just needed to take a deep breath. Who else? What were his other options? Mike Vrabel, a guy like that. Would that guy even take the job? I'll defend Mark on this one. I think he was in a tough spot, though. I would bet against this working unless they get the number 1 overall pick and the next quarterback they draft is a high-end player. What do you think about this proposed rule change? Like many others, my least favorite play in football is the ticky-tack defensive holding, wipe out a 3rd and long, automatic first down. I added that part. I was thinking about how to fix this so that's not extremely punitive, but also doesn't allow the defense to take advantage and mug receivers on obvious passing downs. Here's my solution. Get rid of the auto first down and instead make it a spot foul with a minimum of 5 yards and with a redo of the down. Example, 3rd and 17. So this offense has had a rough little stretch here on this series. Holding, flag thrown, 8 yards past the line of scrimmage. It now becomes 3rd and 9 instead of 1st and 10. I've always believed, and I'm glad you bring this up, defensive holding should be a spot foul. I've even gone as far as like pass interference. I like the college rule. I don't like you getting 50 yards. I really don't. Like, to me, it should just be an automatic 15 yards. Like, if a ball is not caught, and I get it, some guys get tackled, and I would have no problem. I mean, zero. I'm behind you. I've been saying for a decade, spot foul defensive holding and 15 yards for pass interference. I hate these penalties, and I get some are egregious, right? And like you said, not all defensive holdings are the same. I honestly think most of them lean on the side of ticky-tack. Clearly, there are some pass interferences that are no-brainers. But is there anything worse than a quarterback making a throw on like 3rd and 12? It has no chance. I mean, Calvin Johnson meets Michael Jordan in his prime, couldn't have touched the ball, and the defender's not looking, runs into him, and you get 60 yards or even 38 yards. It's like, I don't know if that should be rewarded. I'm all for, if you take a guy out, a penalty, but 15 yards to me, just universally, 24/7, 365, college and pro. Like, I get the 2-foot rule in the pros. It should be more difficult in college. Like, I'm not holding Alabama's star player right now on offense is a 17-year-old guy. If he can't get 2 feet down all the time, like, he's 17 years old. But I watched Cooper Kupp, 30 years old, made however much money in the NFL, Super Bowl champ, like, hold him to a higher regard. So he gets 2 feet down, which was an incredible catch on Sunday night. Early, I would say early potential catch of the year. I'm a sucker for a ball thrown into the sideline, and the Chris Carter, for those of you that are too young to get that reference, he's not even on TV anymore, but In the 90s, nobody. And I mean, this includes Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin, Randy Moss. Nobody could work a sideline better than Chris Carter. He could have those 2 feet in. It was a thing of beauty, and that's what Cooper Kupp did. But I hear you. Touchdowns, TD, Huddy, take it into the house, in for 6. I like to call it a tug. Whatever you call touchdown, one thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, special teams or defense, we do not care how you score them. We just want to bet touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? I know I do it all the time. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. This is from Justin. I thought it was Justin Tuck. It was Justin Tack. It's like, oh man, Big Tuck listens. Why do nearly all analysts talk about offense today and quarterbacks in general like they're better than 10 years ago? In my opinion, the average quarterback now is much worse than the 2010s. Scoring is actually down the past couple of years, and other than Allen and Mahomes, no one really compares to an era where we had Manning, Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, Ben, Phillip, Eli, Matt Ryan. Those guys threw 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns in 16 games. And most of them reached 5,040 touchdowns at some point in their career. Just judging by the eye test, Mahomes and Allen seem light years beyond everyone else right now. Totally agree. I mean, do you think Lamar Jackson would have had the same success 25 years ago? You have to be accurate. Your quarterback's getting killed. And when you are running is a huge part of your game, what do you think these players would have done to him? Now, he's hard to hit. But when they were allowed to break you in half, it would have been much harder to be that confident as a runner. You had to kind of pick your spots. Michael Vick got his leg shattered in a preseason game. I was there in Philadelphia with Michael Vick. He broke ribs and punctured spleens, all that. He was getting crushed. I mean, and he's one of the greatest athletes in the history of the league. So that's my issue with Gardner Minshew. Is last year, who are they playing? The Steelers. This is a bad Steeler loss. I think they were rolling out Trubisky. And Minshew threw a ball, and I forget the DB's name, but he got, helmet to helmet, and he got kicked out of the game or whatever. And it's like, that is such a shitty pass. In the history of the sport up until 5 years ago, that is called a hospital ball. Hospital balls don't exist anymore because no one through hitting, for the most part, ever goes to the hospital. The only guys we've seen go to the hospital in recent memory were like Alex, when his leg got twisted, DeMar Hamlin, when his heart stopped, right? But people used to, I remember being at Eagles game where Austin Collie I thought he was dead on the field. I wasn't at the game, but when I was with the Eagles, I think we were playing Atlanta. Deshaun Jackson might have been killed on the field. And if you put those balls into harm, what people would get injured. It's why when Tom Brady talks about it, he's like, people think he's being a hater. No, he's just saying, like, this is not really allowed. It's like when Anthony Edwards the other day, within the last couple of weeks, said that, like, none of the guys in the 90s could play today, and everyone that plays today would be the best player back then. It's like, what are you talking about? The NBA's never been less skilled. There's never been better athletes, but they've never been less skilled. And back then, you weren't just allowed to drive to the basket every play. Because you know what? You would get a forearm to the teeth. And it sounds like old guy acting tough, but like that was legitimately sports. Just YouTube some of the brawls in baseball. You throw inside a couple times, like we're throwing fists at each other's face. Now there's so much money the world's changed and it's obviously not the same, but playing quarterback now, one, has never been easier. And the totality of it, I think you could argue, has never. We just assume, for example, and I'm guilty of this, that Caleb, Bo Nix, and Jaden Daniels will be able to play in the league. There's a decent chance that 2 out of the 3 of them will not have their 5th-year option picked up. And it's never been easier to play quarterback. So what would they have looked like 20 years ago? Now, to me, a huge part of the game is obviously in the shotgun. Guys are really comfortable. But when you're under center, there are some pretty easy plays because play action is such a big part of it. That if teams that can run the ball, and good teams have always been able to run the ball, play action under center gives you a lot of layups. Well, now everyone's just, for the most part, out of shotgun. Someone hit me up the other day. It's like, why is Kirk Cousins out of the shotgun nonstop? Well, could be partly because the Achilles, he can't move nearly as good as he once could, and he never moved that great. Rodgers loved the shotgun, always. It's why when LaFleur got there and wanted him to play kind of more of the Shanahan offense, and he kind of pushed back, then eventually they kind of met in the middle, and he's won a couple MVPs. But I completely agree. Like, Gardner Minshew could not start if this was 1999. And if he could, he'd last 3 games. It doesn't mean that every quarterback was good, but it was way harder to play. Way harder to play. Because you couldn't throw balls all over the map. Guys would get killed and you'd get yanked. Now, I do think the top guys could all play. Like, I'm not saying Lamar couldn't play. He would play. But, like, when you look at Vic, who had a stronger arm than him, he got hurt a lot. A lot. You know? And I just think it's hard to play. It's easier to play a running style. If you told me Jaden Daniels was doing what he just did week 1 in 1996, I'd be like, I don't know if he's going to make it a month. They weren't throwing flags. There was no sliding and he's off limits. So I think we have to acknowledge the game has dramatically changed. Like, I don't want to see quarterbacks get hurt, so I don't really push back against it, but I think you're right. Lifelong Steelers fan. Nice win. Sunday, the defense looked pretty good. I'd say excellent. But even with the new offensive coordinator and quarterback Justin Fields, the offense looked the same it has dating back to when Ben's arm gave out. I like Tomlin, but is this defensive coaching mentality holding us back, or what change do you need to happen to give a shot to contend in the AFC? I like this player. I've been following him since high school, but I think he's closer to just a guy than a high-end player. And it's not all his fault. I think your offensive line has been a little hit or miss. But if you had a do-over, you would not have taken Najee Harris in the first round. And I watched the game today. I was on the Stairmaster, no big deal, just trying to shed a few pounds. And he gets a lot of carries, you know, and he has his entire career when he's healthy for you guys. And to me, he's just kind of, he's fine. Like, I watch Jordan Mason, I go, yeah, he's a better player. I wouldn't trade Jordan Mason, an undrafted free agent, for Najee Harris. So that, to me, if you had a high-end player there, I do think your offense would just look a lot better. Like, to me, he's, as the kids say, mid. I thought Fields actually played pretty well. Pickens is obviously really good. Freiermuth is a really good player. I just think, when I think back to some of the better Pittsburgh teams, I think you guys had good running backs. I mean, the best offenses were when Ben was in his latter years of his prime with AB. You had Le'Veon Bell, who was a stud. I remember Rashad Mendenhall was a really good player for a couple of years. Like, you guys have always had really good running backs. I watch Najee, I just go, eh. Again, I like him. Antioch, California, played Pittsburgh High. Followed his career since Alabama. But that was a big-time overdraft, and they've just kind of stuck it out. I have a potential fix to the new kickoff that I think you should consider. Well, I mean, I don't get to consider it. It's not my call. To keep kickers from booting it through the back of the end zone, they should treat the boundary in the back of the end zone the same as they treat the sidelines on kickoffs. If the kick lands between 20 and the goal, it should still have to be returned, and there should be no penalty. If it hits the white of the back of the end zone after rolling, meaning out of bounds, out of the white of the back of the end zone, let me reread that. It should still have to be returned. There should be no penalty. If it hits the white out of the back of the end zone after rolling, but if the ball lands in the end zone and does not stop before the boundary, they should place the ball at the 40. Don't hate that. It doesn't seem, just based on reporting, that they plan on doing anything drastic to this rule. But I think it's pretty clear. I watched a little bit of Andy's press conference the other day. Would have been Monday. They're like, why'd you just kick it through the end zone? He's like, yeah, we just felt that was the percentages, not worth the risk. He's like, then at home and at the office watching games on Sunday, saw a couple big returns. So, yeah, I think we feel pretty good about that decision. And I think more and more and more you're going to see. I mean, the 49ers are putting Deebo Samuel back there. You would have to be on cocaine to kick him the ball. That was the most aggressive, and I don't agree with that. It's like, guys, Christian McCaffrey's injured right now, and who knows his status? I don't think it's worth Deebo getting in some weird collision on this. Just throw a rookie back there. And I'm pro doing that in like a playoff game or, to win the division or even a divisional game, the last kick of the game. But I also think one thing's clear. If you do throw a Tyreek, a Deebo back there in general, to me, that's an auto kick it out of bounds. But like you said, if you weren't allowed to kick it out of bounds, then it would change. But I don't think that's necessarily going to change anytime soon. Love the pod. This is from Adam. Congrats on the recent engagement. Appreciate it. Was listening to your take on the overtime rules, and I feel like there's an easy solution to both teams to get a chance. If the first team that gets the ball scores a touchdown, they have the choice to either kick the extra point or go for two. If they kick the extra point, the second team must go for two. If they also score a touchdown on their possession, as they would either win or lose on the 2-point try. If the first team scores and chooses to go for two and fails, the second team has to score a touchdown and kick an extra point to win the game. If both teams score a touchdown and a 2-point on their first overtime possession, the next team to score wins. At some point, a defense has to make a stop. Would make for legendary decisions and moments. Listen, I think the overtime rule, which I don't know on average on a 16-game season how many overtime games you see, it's probably not as many as I think you would guess. If I have no clue, I haven't looked it up. If I was taking an educated guess over the last 10 years, on average, how many overtime games a year, I'd pick well under 10. I'd probably go 6 or 7. Maybe I'm crazy. That's what it feels like to me. There just aren't that many. But I'm not against what you just said. It's from Marco. What's the deal with Zac Taylor? Despite leading the Bengals to the Super Bowl, no one seems to talk about him ever. The team's uninspiring performance in Week 1 raises concerns about whether he had the team prepared to compete. I don't think it raises concerns. I mean, we witnessed it. He did not. They scored 10 points at home against the New England Patriots while their quarterback threw for 121 yards. Red flag if you're coach that can't get the team fired up for the season. I don't know much about him. Like, I don't know him personally. I've just followed his career in Cincy. I think anytime that kind of out of the blue you make a Super Bowl, and they were winning late in that Super Bowl, it buys you a lot of equity with the owner, especially you're an offensive coach. Burrows has one of the biggest contracts in the league. But I don't know. I would say, what if he won like 7 games this year? I don't quite know what his defining characteristic is because I wouldn't call him some genius offensive coordinator. Maybe this is fair, maybe it's not. I felt like when I watched them play really well, it's just like Burrow throwing go routes and post routes to their sweet receivers. I mean, I could call those. He has nothing to do with the defense. I give him credit for the Lou Anarumo hire, because that was his guy. They knew each other from Miami. But yeah, I mean, I would say there are some legitimate questions out there with this guy. And if Burrow is a shell of himself this year, it could be a long freaking season for them. But say this. If Zac Taylor's fired, let's say they go well under 500, fired week at Black Monday, is he getting hired? I would say no. Question for the pod. If the Patriots keep winning, but Jacoby keeps playing mediocre bare minimum, what does that mean for Drake May? I think ideally they don't want to play him. Now, are the Patriots going to keep winning? Let's just fire up. I don't even know. I haven't even looked at the schedule this week, really, beside a couple games. Who do the old New England Patriots play? Week 1, week 2. The Patriots play Seattle. I think that would be a little more difficult. I don't know if you can throw for 121 yards and beat Seattle, because Kenneth Walker, Lockett, DK, Jackson Smith, I would expect Seattle to win. I haven't even looked at the line. My guess would be Seattle's favored by 4 or 5 on the road. Maybe it's 3.5, 4, but kind of like Seattle in that spot, actually. I have to look at the line. Let's bring up my old friends at DraftKings here. NFL. I do like the Bills Thursday night. I might hammer them money line. Seattle's a 3.5 point favorite. I think that's an auto hammer for me. Do you believe Doug Pederson is on the hot seat? He threw Ryan Nielsen under the bus after the loss to their Dolphins, only threw the ball 7 times in the second half, despite with success in the first half. He went for it on 4th down on their own 30, which I think is fair to say is the most egregious call. His team looked completely clueless on offense and special teams as well. What happened to him? He looked like a bad head coach for roughly 10 weeks in a row now. I was listening to, I think, like a Bill Simmons podcast before the season. Do you know that he's only had 1 winning season? I'm saying that out loud and it doesn't even sound true. Maybe it was 1 10-win season. I'm bringing up his coaching resume. Obviously, the year he won the Super Bowl, they were really good. But here's stats. Doug Pederson. 2016, 7-9. Next year, Super Bowl year, 13-3, win Super Bowl. 9-7, 9-7, 4-11. Obviously fired. Takes the year off, comes back in 22. 9-8. That was the year that they beat the Chargers on that crazy game with Brandon Staley. Last year, 9-8. And this year, obviously, awful loss. So I think it's fair to assume 4-11, outlier year. 2020 COVID, not holding that against them. 13-3 Super Bowl. Clearly an outlier year, but if you're going to have an outlier year, beating Belichick in the Super Bowl is an all-timer. First Super Bowl in the history of the Eagles. I think it's fair to assume that Doug Pederson is exactly who you think he is. 9-7, 9-7, 9-8, 9-8. Like, that's him. He is the ultimate 9-8 coach. Who's like more likable. I know him, but than like Jason Garrett, who I think fell under the same thing, but never won a Super Bowl. So are you just cool with always being 9 wins? But I think the day and age, like when you look at the coaches that can win like 12, 13, like Andy, Kyle, McVay, John Harbaugh, I would say Dan Campbell this year, I would not put Doug in that. So would he get fired for going 9-8? I don't know. We talked about it on the podcast like earlier. I do think that's one to keep an eye on for old William Belichick, assuming that Trevor Lawrence shows something this year, because they're going to be Cowboys don't come open. Would he rather have Trevor Lawrence, or would he rather have, if Sirianni? To me, McCarthy, if he makes the playoffs, probably is getting a contract extension. Or Sirianni better do some serious stuff, or he could get fired. Who would Bill like more, Jalen Hurts or Trevor Lawrence? What division would he like to play in more? That's why the Giants don't make that much sense. But keep the questions coming, baby. We'll keep answering them. Thanks for doing it. Peace.